Hello, my name is Marion Devine. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this edition of Off the Shelf, a book discussion series brought to you by the Conference Board. Today, I'm really delighted to be sitting down with Alison Maitland to discuss her latest book, which is Indivisible, Radically Rethinking Inclusion for Sustainable Business Results. And she's co-authored this with Rebecca Steele. It's just been released and it's available through Amazon. So Alison's an author, a speaker, an advisor, a coach, and she's a specialist, a real leading specialist in leadership, inclusion, diversity, and the very fast-changing world of work. You might know her when she was a very long-serving Financial Times writer, and she's also the co-author of 3 books. And again, you might have read her future work, which made a huge splash, and also Why Women Mean Business. She's a senior fellow with us at the Conference Board, and she's also senior visiting fellow at Cass Business Schools. So, Alison, welcome today to this podcast.
Hello, Marion. Thank you very much for having me.
Alison, I know that you have been really influential in helping organisations move forward in diversity, inclusion, and especially sort of recognising the value that it can create, not for just individuals, but the whole business. So now you've finally written this book, and to me, there is a sort of a real energy and passion emanating from it. What did it mean to you to write this book with Rebecca Steele?
Well, it meant a lot. Rebecca and I, actually, yes, we do both care very deeply about helping organizations to achieve their goals by making the most of the value of inclusion and diversity. And actually, in our work, both separately and together, we've long been spearheading new ways of thinking, new ways of working to generate better results and impact. And we saw that with organizations around the world and across different sectors, that there was really a crying need for a more effective approach to inclusion because leaders know that inclusion is important, but they aren't sure how to define it tangibly and how to measure its impact effectively, or indeed what strategies and actions will really work. And so our book addresses this gap between the promise and the practice of inclusion.
Great, thank you. So we're going to discuss a little bit now about the book, but just to give our listeners an overview, the book is to me it's a really call, a loud call for a more bold, a more ambitious and comprehensive inclusion strategy. And the authors talk about through this that you can harness collective superpower. And I think something that I particularly like about the book is that saying that, you know, this collective superpower is so important at this time when, you know, individual brain power just isn't enough to help our businesses have impact, to have an impact on society, to help our societies deal with some of the massive problems out there. And as Alison said, they look at why there are, you know, the current approach just doesn't seem to be promising on delivering its promises. They outline really in a lovely step-by-step way how to move to this new model of inclusion, which they call inclusion with impact. And so the whole span of the book goes from very much walking you through understanding the difference between diversity and inclusion, that it is something that's more than an individual feeling. It's something that's more than relevant for marginalized groups. It's something that goes beyond your own internal workforce. It's something that's at the heart of your business strategy. It's something that's relevant across society. So I think to me, the thing that stands out about this book is the expansiveness of the vision. And I think that looking at the reviews, Herminia Ibarra, and I hope I've said her name correctly, the absolute thought leader from London Business School, has given a fantastic review. And she actually says that the book on inclusion is the one that we've been waiting for. That it's engaging and informative. It's a must read. So I think that's a wonderful review. So yeah. So let's, Alison, let's get into to really looking at this book. So I think let's start at the beginning. Can you talk us a little bit about how you define and how you think about inclusion? What is it?
Well, yeah, we start by looking at the difference between diversity and inclusion, because these two are often confused. I mean, they go together and they're complementary, but they're not the same thing. They're often confused, for example, when companies talk about their progress on inclusion, but they're actually referring to their diversity numbers. So the representation, for example, the ratio of women to men in leadership, or the proportion of people with disabilities that they have in their workforce. Now, diversity, that's to say, the full mix of people, identities, strengths, ideas, and experiences, is a reality in the world, in our societies, and in the workforce. However, because that reality is often not reflected in organizations, especially at senior levels, diversity has come to be seen as something of a problem to be solved. Now, Rebecca and I reframe that. Diversity is actually an opportunity for organizations to seize, but diversity cannot thrive without inclusion. Without inclusion, diversity remains unfulfilled potential. So, inclusion is seizing the opportunity of diversity. It's about designing, creating, and sustaining environments in which everyone can flourish. And it's not enough, for example, for a company to hire a broad mix of people. If those people's voices are not heard, if their contributions are not valued, if they're not able to make progress, they will walk, and so will that company's return on investment. And as you say, in our book, we show that inclusion is about much more than people think it is. It's more than that afterthought that comes after diversity and inclusion.
Mm,
It's more than just me
yeah.
as an individual and whether I feel included. It's more than a sense of belonging. It's more than an organization's internal workforce. It's more than an end in itself. So inclusion is not an add-on or a nice to have. It's indivisible from the way that organizations should operate.
So, I mean, that's you're sort of leading into my next question, Alison. Why is it important? Is it just important for some people? Why, what's brought you to put inclusion into this really expansive context? Uh, and especially, I think it's an important question in itself because at the moment we're in a very strange situation with the COVID-19 crisis. Everybody is isolated. So I think this is a very timely point for your book. So why is it so important?
Well, for one thing, organizations are facing hugely disruptive challenges, both internally and externally, and none more so than right now. And to manage through these massive challenges, to find, let's say, innovative solutions, to create a sustainable path to our future, organizations have to call on the ideas and perspectives and experiences of the broadest possible mix of people and to get those people on board. So, here are three reasons for companies to focus specifically on inclusion: performance, preparedness, and purpose. We call them the three Ps. So, first of all, there's plenty of research showing that inclusion drives business performance. For example, improving collaboration, innovation, increasing productivity, reducing risk, promoting employee well-being, motivation, enhancing customer relationships, boosting revenues. And secondly, there's business preparedness. So that is, for example, building inclusion into your design processes. So that ensures that new technology doesn't unintentionally exclude or discriminate against significant sections of your customers and users. And inclusive skills are really important for preparedness too. Inclusive skills like appreciative listening, emotional intelligence, and social influence are exactly the higher level interpersonal skills that we need to thrive alongside machines, alongside smart machines, and the skills that also hold a dispersed workforce together. So these are skills that organizations need more than ever in the unfolding global crisis that we're in right now. And the third P I mentioned is purpose. Companies are increasingly concerned to demonstrate a purpose beyond profit, and advancing inclusion in your organization and across society is a really powerful way to demonstrate a purpose around which people will coalesce.
Yeah. And I think you said at the very beginning that you did feel that organizations, individuals, leaders, really are recognizing the importance of this inclusiveness and the need for, as you said, this purpose. But at the same time, we know that progress has been pretty slow. And I know at the conference board, we do have member companies saying, how do we make more progress? Why is it so slow? We seem to be doing so many of the right things. So what's your feeling, Alison? Why do you think progress is slow?
Yes, it's important, first of all, I think, to acknowledge that there has been some welcome progress in some areas, but overall, there is a slow, very slow pace, and there is some regression and inadequate results. So these are all signs that we do need fresh approaches. And Rebecca and I see several reasons why organizations are not advancing on diversity and inclusion in the way that they really want to be. One is a reliance on piecemeal efforts. So rather than a comprehensive, indivisible strategy, many are approaching diversity and inclusion as a set of, say, disconnected programs or isolated events. A second common trap that we see is when companies replicate what are often called best practices that are actually ineffective and don't achieve the intended outcomes. So they waste resources and they can be unintentionally damaging. I mean, one example of this is implicit bias training, which is very widely used in organizations, but has been shown by research to have limited impact on long-term behavior and on the mix of diversity, the mix of people that you have in your organization. A third problem is when diversity and inclusion are not linked to business outcomes. So when business leaders fail to integrate D&I strategies into their overarching business goals, they are setting up D&I as optional and as a distraction from critical goals. However, it doesn't have to be this way, and we offer a whole new approach.
Fantastic. Well, that seems quite a good point to just stop for a minute, Alison, leaving us with that interesting thought. So we're just going to take a short break for some quick announcements, and we will be back in just a minute to continue where Alison's just left off, and where she's going to lead us a little bit more through Indivisible, her book with Rebecca Steele.
Looking for additional business insights in this subject area and beyond this podcast, go to tcb.org and explore our Human Capital Centre. Uncover a large array of products hosted by the Conference Board in focus areas like diversity and inclusion, talent management, and many others. Products include peer-to-peer networking events, expert briefings, publications, data and analysis, webcasts, videos and blogs.
So hello and welcome back to our conversation with Alison Maitland, who is author with Rebecca Steele of Indivisible, Radically Rethinking Inclusion for Sustainable Business Results. And Alison, just before the break, you were saying that despite progress being slow, it doesn't have to be like this. So I think this is a great point now to tell us a little bit about what approach do you see? Are you really advocating for? What approach should organisations be taking to inclusion?
Yes, thank you. Well, we're advocating a whole system approach, and we call our approach inclusion impact because it has impact. And really, you have to take a comprehensive approach with inclusion, just as you do with any other business driver, critical business driver. So our inclusion impact approach clearly links inclusion with business relevant results, and it integrates it consistently into every aspect of an organization. I think a quick framework to explain this is to ask the following questions about inclusion: who, what, where, and why. So organizations typically try to address inclusion through limited responses to these questions. The who is limited to individual employees, for example, with a few questions about inclusion that are thrown into an annual employee engagement survey. The what is limited to feelings about inclusion, perceptions of inclusion. The where is limited to the internal workforce, typically, and the why, well, actually, the why is often unmeasured, unclear, and disconnected from business results. So this limited understanding and measurement leads to, of course, limited action, results, and impact, and hence the frustration that many leaders experience about progress with inclusion. So with our impact approach, the who extends to everyone, not just individuals, but teams, managers, and senior leaders. And it covers people who are marginalized and people who are in the mainstream population. And actually, it's an important point to make that we provide plenty of actions that people can take, whether they are senior leaders, middle managers, or individual contributors, because everyone has a role to play in inclusion and everyone is impacted by it. So the what covers in inclusion impact covers not only feelings, but also actions and organizational structures. Structures, by that I mean processes, systems, written and unwritten rules that can either support or undermine inclusion.
And I think actually, Alison, just to butt in there, the fact that you do extend it to those sort of three dimensions is so useful, because a lot of companies do think that when looking at inclusion, it's really just a feeling, and you do say that very powerfully in the book. It is more than a feeling.
Absolutely, yes. And actually, we also we dug deep into what inclusion really is and what are the core components of it, and we came up with 10 enablers, we call them, that really need to be in place to ensure an inclusive work environment. And these are things like trust and transparency, participation and shared power, as well as things that are perhaps a little bit more obvious, like respect and openness. And then the where, so our where covers what's going on inside the organization, but also relationships with external partners. So people like contract workers, customers, investors, and also with wider society, because organizations don't exist in a vacuum. They are impacted by what's going on in wider society, and they impact what happens in society. And then finally, the why. Now that's about asking and then showing how your inclusion strategy can help you achieve your business goals and actually deliver positive impact for individuals and the business and for society. And actually, I should say that we add to these 4 W's, we add a 5th W, which is when, because inclusion is dynamic. It's not a static thing. And it's dependent on context, it's dependent on experience. And it therefore has to be done intentionally, not once a year or once a month or once a week, but in every single interaction. And actually, I think I could share an analogy with what's going on right now in the world, because to tackling exclusion and to create healthy, inclusive work environments, you need to take this comprehensive approach. And there is this analogy with how the world is having to tackle the COVID-19 crisis. You can't respond effectively by focusing only on people's feelings. We know, for example, that some people have got the virus even when they feel well. And we've seen examples of some people believing that they have no responsibility with regard to spreading the virus. You can't rely only on individual actions. Well, we all need to wash our hands and we need to practice physical distance, but those actions are not enough on their own to address the challenge. In addition to feelings and actions, we need this whole system strategy that coordinates healthcare systems to handle the influx of patients, that where businesses are ensuring employees can work from home, and where governments are doing things like restricting unnecessary travel and public gatherings and intervening with financial and economic support. So all of these elements are interdependent parts of a whole system approach. And it is the same with tackling exclusion and creating healthy, inclusive work environments.
I think that's a really great example, Alison, and so topical. And it does seem to me that that sort of systems-wide approach is something that eludes us because, you know, I don't know, it seems like it's a complexity that's almost overwhelming to try and get the whole system working together. But certainly in this situation, we're seeing that that's just so important. Yeah. Have you got any sort of I mean, how would you sort of get that is there a specific skill about getting that systems wide approach to inclusion?
Well, it takes intention, it takes work, and you have to start by with leaders, organizational leaders, actually stepping back. So with inclusion, stepping back and saying, what is our strategy? What are our business goals? What is our purpose as an organization? And how can we use inclusion to help us to get there? And how are we going to work this into and ensure, that all of our systems and processes and the signals that we send out throughout the organization are actually sending the same consistent message? Because, another analogy that we use in the book actually is that inclusion is rather like a roundabout or a traffic intersection, a traffic roundabout or a traffic intersection. So everyone has a responsibility to go by the rules. There have to be rules to ensure and signals to ensure that this intersection actually works well. It's also down to individual responsibility. It's not enough just to feel, well, I can go around this roundabout. I can go first. We have to give and take. So there's a lot of, it's not a one-way street. It's about stepping back and stepping forward. Allowing other people to step in and stepping in when we need to step in. So that whole system strategy, it requires working through everything that you do in an organization to ensure that there is consistency across feelings, actions, and organizational structures. And we give a lot of advice about how to do that. Obviously, we give a lot of advice about how to do that in the book. But for example, one of the actions that we suggest for senior leaders is, take time to reflect on what your organization is missing if it focuses only on feelings of inclusion, only on feelings of inclusion, and start a formal and transparent assessment of how inclusive behaviors are at every level of the company and what formal structures are in place. So there are some starting points, but there's lots and lots of advice, obviously, in the book.
I think it would be fascinating, actually, Alison, if after, hopefully, when we get through this COVID-19 crisis, if some of your thinking about inclusion and your inclusion framework, could be visited in the light of what's happened, and wouldn't that be great to actually see that we'd learned some really useful things around inclusion across our society. I think in the book as well, something that really gained my attention was that, you make the point as well that sustainability and inclusion are interdependent. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Because that seems to be, to me, again, a very exciting linkage.
Yes, we think so too. Yes, we say, as I mentioned before, that inclusion reaches inside your organization, but it also extends outside to all your stakeholders and actually to the societies and communities in which organizations operate. And we write about the interdependence of inclusion and sustainability. We see this emerging as a significant new trend. And we're talking here about sustainability, social sustainability, as well as environmental sustainability. We highlight some pioneering companies that are setting the pace on this with strategies that are built on what we call the twin pillars of inclusion and sustainability, because we see these as being at the heart of the successful company of the future. And they're building bridges across society. They're finding breakthrough solutions to our most pressing challenges and creating value for their organizations all at the same time. So in the book, we really invite leaders to be ambitious and to think big and to work collaboratively for inclusion, because our collective future depends on that.
Mhm. Great, thank you, Alison. So, again, I really commend this book to people out there. And just in the last part of our discussion, Alison, this is your chance to, as an author, to give us a little bit of insight into what you yourself enjoy reading. So, what are you reading now?
Oh, well, I've got a pile of books that I'm hoping to read during the lockdown to expand my mind, and for entertainment, of course, as well. I've just started a book called The Body, A Guide for Occupants by Bill Bryson, which seems very timely as well. Also on my list are Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez and Hilary Mantel's latest book, The Mirror and the Light. And I'm also looking forward to reading Think Outside the Building, which is by one of our book's endorsers, Rosabeth Moss-Cantor. So quite a lot on my reading list. They're all quite chunky books.
They sound wonderful, yeah. And actually, in an ironic sense, reading a book is exclusive. How would you encourage people to read your book in an inclusive way?
Yes, well, actually, that's a really good point, and we know that currently the crisis is really sort of threatening the momentum of D&I strategies and disrupting D&I events for companies, and that's actually piling on the anxiety for everyone who's working for positive change in this area. So one inclusive way that people can stay connected, really inclusive way, and collaboratively learning and actually building on the value that D&I creates for organizations is to start a virtual reading circle with our book, INdivisible, of course. So you could invite everyone in your organization to read the book, maybe host a couple of virtual meetings to discuss your insights and ideas, and the practical actions that individuals can take at any level, and also how to transform your strategy for more sustainable results. And of course, we as authors are happy to join in a virtual discussion and answer people's questions. Or another way to do it would be to send the ebook to everyone who's impacted by an event that's been cancelled, or to encourage small groups of leaders and employees in the company to read a couple of chapters of Indivisible together and at a time, and meet regularly online to discuss how they can put their insights into action. And we also think that you could include your key external partners, for example, contractors or suppliers or customers, in your discussions.
Great. Well, and Alison, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and sharing your thoughts about your book. And thank you as well to our listeners for being with us. You can purchase Alison's and Rebecca's book, Indivisible, from Amazon, and you can have it as a paperback, but also as an ebook. And you can also get it from Barnes and Noble, the publisher. And you can also go to Rebecca and Alison's own website, which is Indivisible, www.indivisible/ or it might be a minus sign. Sorry, indivisible hyphen, or it might be a minus sign, book.com. Alison, is that the correct way to tell everybody that link?
Yes, that's right. So it's in indivisible-book.com. But for some people, hyphen is the minus. It's the minus on the keyboard.
Great, thank you. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please remember to subscribe to our Off the Shelf book discussion podcast series, and you can explore the entire catalogue of our podcast programs from the conference board by visiting our website at www.tcb.org/podcast. So thank you very much, Alison, for joining us today. And thank you very, very much, everybody, for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.